Hello there, you're watching All 24 News, World News program with me, Karim Zachary, and up next are the top stories. African startup ministers meet to push a knowledge-based economy, adopt the Algiers Declaration, and call for strategic cooperation, while Algeria earns praise for leading a unified vision. Also in our news, the Sahrawi president vows the struggle for freedom continues. The Polisario Front urges the EU to resist legitimizing Moroccan occupation, while Cuba reaffirms support for the Sahrawi Republic. Next up, in Gaza, violence continues. 2 young men are killed in Al Khalil, a woman in Gaza. UNRWA reports over 500 children with acute malnutrition, while Hamas insists occupation must end and a Palestinian state be established before giving up arms. And in Sudan, the government links space initiative to the fate of the rapid support forces. Over 20 million people face malnutrition, and the African Union calls the ongoing war a stain on the world's conscience. The details are right up. Welcome back. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, in Algiers, African ministers at the 4th Startup Conference have adopted the Algiers Declaration, praising President of the Republic Abdelmadjid Tebboune for creating the conditions for a successful continental event. They highlighted his push for innovation, support for startups, and efforts to strengthen African financing for new ideas. The ministers also reaffirmed their commitment to youth empowerment, intra-African cooperation, and easier mobility for entrepreneurs. On top of that, a new monitoring system will track progress on the declaration and past conference recommendations, keeping African startups on course and uniting efforts across the continent. In the same context, the 4th African Startup Conference continued in Algiers with strong participation from across the continent and beyond. On the second day, ministers gathered for the summit to discuss the 4th Algiers Declaration aimed at supporting African entrepreneurs. Algeria's Minister Noureddin Wadah said the talks focused on building a new African economy driven by youth and knowledge, including approving tasks, incentives, and funding scientific research. The goal is to create the right environment for startups that can compete on a global scale.
And I give the floor in first position.
أصحاب المعالي والسعادة الوزراء.
اليوم نحن على موعد مهم.
We are approaching a crucial ministerial meeting, the centerpiece of the Africa Startup Summit. This 4th edition will focus on 2 key themes. The first theme highlights African success stories, showcasing how the continent's startups are driving transformative change in Africa's economy, advancing technological and digital transformation, and promoting economic prosperity. The ministerial meeting will also review best practices adopted by African countries, particularly Algeria, to empower young people to innovate and contribute to building a new knowledge-based economy. The second theme addresses tax incentives and funding for scientific research, both vital components for launching startups capable of mastering technology and creating an enabling environment that allows them to compete with leading regional and international enterprises.
وهي التحفيزات الضريبية وتمويل البحث العلمي في سبيل إطلاق مؤسسات ناشئة تتحكم في التكنولوجيا وتكون لها بيئة ملائمة لمنافسة أكبر المؤسسات الناشئة في القارات الأخرى.
And on the same occasion, African ministers of communications and digital economy have adopted the Algiers Declaration on fair, secure, and responsible digital platforms. The move under the African Telecommunications Union sets a unified continental stance to boost Africa's digital sovereignty. The declaration aims to level the playing field with global tech platforms, introducing rules for fair economic participation, stronger data protection, and responsible use of artificial intelligence, giving Africa a stronger voice in the digital world.
اقترحنا في مشروعنا أن نغير أفريقيا.
In our project, we propose transforming Africa from a spectator into creator of content, a decision maker, and an active player in its own future, to establish legal frameworks that allow our voices to be heard and enable the African continent to position itself globally, demand its right, and call on major actors to invest, create jobs, and contribute to the African economy. This is why the draft Algiers Declaration was signed, which will be presented to the African Union at the upcoming meeting in 2026.
And it's worth noting the Algiers Declaration is set to go to the African Union Summit early next year. It lays out new obligations for platforms operating in Africa and positions the continent as a key partner in shaping the global digital landscape. And at the closing of the Africa In event in Algiers, Minister Sidali Zarouki said the Algiers Declaration on Fair, Secure and Responsible Digital Platforms shows Africa can speak with one voice and influence global digital rules. For his part, Secretary General of the African Telecommunications Union, John Umo, praised Algeria's approach for ensuring Africa gets a fair share of revenue from its data, while African Union official Lorena Doron Maktabouji highlighted Algeria's role in shaping a unified continental vision on Africa's digital challenges.
I think it goes without saying that platforms are important. It goes without saying that the networks that we have invested in are important to us. And globally, there's still no agreement in terms of how issues of revenue share, issues of how the networks that are established in this continent can relate with OTTs. And I think this process that has begun here in Algeria is the first of its kind in this continent.
We're quite pleased as the African Union and commend the government of Algeria for coordinating the various countries for us to get to this point where we can actually have a unified view and a unified voice when it comes to Africa's digital sovereignty. So today we just had a very pivotal meeting that got us to a point where we have an African view in an African position that we can begin to domesticate on the African continent. We are quite pleased as the African Union to lend support to the work that the African Telecommunications Union.
On a related note, Rwanda's Secretary of State for ICT and Innovation, Yves Iradukunda, says the African Startup Conference is a key platform for boosting cooperation between governments and the private sector to build a strong, sustainable innovation ecosystem. Speaking to our channel, he added that African entrepreneurs need solid government support, including the right legal and economic frameworks to grow at home and compete in global markets.
This event is very important because it brings together everyone who's helping Africa startup to create a success and building champions, and also brings together governments, partners, and also coordinating frameworks across the continent to ensure that our startups are supported to grow at scale. Rwanda being a guest of honor for the conference in the 4th edition is a great opportunity, and we are very grateful to the government of Algeria for having invited Rwanda as a guest of honor. It's an opportunity to share experience, to deepen our collaboration with Algeria, but also other governments, and also to learn from one another. Because the success of our entrepreneurs and building champions will require that all of us as governments, as countries, are supporting our startups, creating the right frameworks that are important for them to succeed within their countries, but also across the continent.
Meanwhile, Algeria's Secretary of State for the National Community Abroad, Sofiane Shaib, praised the role of Algerians living abroad in boosting startups at home. Speaking during the National Community Abroad Day at the African Startup Conference, he revealed that 15 to 20% of Algerian startups were founded by members of the diaspora. Mr. Shaib also urged them to get even more involved in reaching the goal of 20,000 startups by 2029. Taking advantage of incentives across legal, digital, institutional, and financial sectors.
This importance stems from the prominent position the national community abroad holds within the government's action plan and implementation of the presidential program, recognizing the community as an integral part of the nation. During the fourth edition of this conference, we ensured the active participation of our community skilled members, which already funds 20% of startups in Algeria, enabling them to meet one another and with their African counterparts. Unlike previous editions, this fourth conference is distinguished by dedicating an entire day to the national community abroad, while past conferences included activities aimed at the community. These were limited in duration compared to the broader focus and more comprehensive program we are witnessing today.
And along similar lines, on Sunday, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf met with Salma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, on the sidelines of the 4th African Startup Conference. According to the Foreign Ministry, they reviewed ongoing cooperation between Algeria and the AU, focusing on development programs linked to the continent's Agenda 2063. Moving on to another development, but in Algeria still. On Sunday, President of the Republic Abdelmadjid Tebboune received the credentials of 5 new ambassadors in Algiers. They include representatives from Jordan, Venezuela, Lebanon, Slovakia, and Chile. Jordan's Ahad Suwaidat praised the long-standing fraternal ties with Algeria, while Venezuela's Imad Saab highlighted strengthening economic cooperation. Lebanon's Ali Maula thanked Algeria for its support and role in Arab causes, and Chile's Juan Claudio Valenzuela emphasized boosting political dialogue and partnerships in energy, education, and culture. The President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, also received outgoing Spanish Ambassador Fernando Moran Caballo for a farewell visit at the end of his term. The meeting, attended by senior presidential advisors, was an opportunity to review Algeria-Spain relations and discuss ways to strengthen cooperation across different sectors.
The President honored me with his reception, and during the meeting we discussed the relation between Algeria and Spain. We agreed on the quality of the relationship, which, although excellent, there are always ways to elevate it further.
In a different story, restoration work has started on Sunday in Algiers' famous Sacred Heart Cathedral. Minister Youssef Belmehdi said the project follows President Abdelmadjid Tebboune's directive to preserve Algeria's cultural and religious heritage, including non-Muslim places of worship. At the same time, 2 historic mosques in the Kasbah are also being restored. Archbishop Jean-Paul Vesco welcomed the initiative, saying it sends a clear message to the world about Algeria's commitment to religious freedom.
In accordance with the instructions of the President of the Republic, and with his personal support and close follow-up on this matter, we are launching today in the presence of the Governor of Algiers, along with Cardinal Pisco, representative of the Catholic Church in Algeria, the restoration project of this cathedral, which has been an integral part of Algeria's history and cultural heritage since the mid-19th century, around 842. This project will undoubtedly help preserve Algeria's heritage, along distinguished by coexistence and peace. It also sends a clear message to the world that Algeria, through its constitution, protects religious freedom and guarantees the free practice of religious rights. This is clearly reflected today in the great care taken by the authorities to restore this landmark and return it to its service with its authentic architectural style and the splendor for which the Sacred Heart Cathedral has always been known.
Simplement aujourd'hui dire que c'est un grand jour pour
Quite simply, this is a great day for us, for our church. This restoration project initiated by President Abdelmajid Tebboune is a beautiful message that Algeria is sending to the world, to the entire world. I'm very happy to see this project becoming a reality. From the presentation we saw this morning, it is clear that the work will be carried out in the best way. This is important because this building is, of course, a place of worship, but it is also part of the heritage of the capital.
Moving on to Western Sahara now, Sahrawi President Ibrahim Ghali has reaffirmed that the struggle for freedom and independence will continue without compromise. Speaking in Boujdour while receiving foreign solidarity delegations and Spanish families, he stressed that the Sahrawi people remain determined to regain their stolen land. President Ghali also tasked the delegation with spreading the message and building support for the Sahrawi cause across Europe. On a similar topic, the Sahrawi Minister of Economy and Finance, Mohamed Mouloud, has called on the international community and the EU to resist Morocco's attempts to legitimize the occupation of Western Sahara. Speaking to our channel during the African Conference of Emerging Enterprises, he said Morocco is trying to expand its control over Sahrawi land and territorial waters through illegal means and by pressuring the EU with illegitimate agreements.
The occupier is doing everything possible to expand its occupation, taking over part of the territory and attempting to illegally seize other areas by land and sea. It also seeks to sign agreement with the European countries on agriculture and fishing. All of these practices are illegal. The world and the European Union must stop these ambitions as they lack legitimacy.
Within the same scope, Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel has reaffirmed his country's commitment to strengthening ties with the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. The statement came during a meeting with Ibrahim Mohamed Mahmoud, who presented his credentials as Sahrawi ambassador to Cuba. The ambassador, in turn, emphasized continuing efforts to deepen the historic relationship between the two countries in support of their shared goals and values. Shifting focus to another topical development, the death toll keeps rising as violence escalates in the occupied West Bank. On Saturday evening, 2 Palestinians were killed by occupation forces in Al Khalil's Bab al-Zawiya area. The Palestinian Red Crescent, meanwhile, said one man bled to death after being shot, with ambulances blocked from reaching him, while eyewitnesses reported that the occupation forces also seized the body of a second victim. Along similar lines, Palestinian medical sources report a 3-year-old girl was killed in a Zionist airstrike at the Rafah border crossing, and at least 3 others, including a child, were injured in attacks on Jabalia and Gaza City's Tufah neighborhood. On Sunday, occupation warplanes struck Rafah and Maghazi, while heavy artillery hit Gaza City and Khan Yunis. The Palestinian Health Ministry said 6 bodies and 17 wounded arrived at hospitals in the past 24 hours, with the toll of the ongoing violations now at 373 dead and 970 wounded, and total casualties since October 7th reaching over 70,000 dead and 171,000 wounded. Meanwhile, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, says more than 500 children in Gaza are suffering from acute malnutrition. Director Tamara Rifai told media on Sunday that aid is not reaching those in need and crossings remain closed by the occupation. She warned the figures show the scale of the humanitarian crisis, putting children in particular at serious risk. In the meantime, Hamas leader in Gaza, Khalil al-Haya, says the movement is ready to hand over its weapons if an independent and sovereign Palestinian state is established and the occupation ends. In a statement on Saturday, he stressed that the issue of weapons is still under discussion with other Palestinian factions and mediators. Al-Haya also said Hamas supports UN forces in Gaza to monitor borders and oversee the ceasefire. Elsewhere, hundreds took to the streets in Berlin on Saturday to show solidarity with Palestine. Protesters gathered outside New Köln Town Hall, calling for an end to arms exports to the Zionist entity and condemning what the ongoing attacks, or what they are describing as attacks and ceasefire violations in Gaza. The demonstration aimed to raise awareness and express support for the Palestinian people. In a separate account, Sudan's government says resolving the fate of the Rapid Support Forces is a must before any international peace initiatives can move forward. Justice Minister Abdullah Darf told the Doha Forum on Sunday that proposed plans don't clearly address the RSF nor their weapons. He stressed that Sudan is facing a war driven by militia trying to seize power, committing atrocities against civilians with backing from foreign powers.
Or any conflict requires
The peace initiatives proposed for Sudan have not offered a clear version of regarding the future of rapid support forces and their weapons. This is a fundamental condition for achieving peace in the country, a peace that must be sustainable, not a tactical process. What is happening in Sudan is not an internal conflict, as many narratives suggest. It is a militia that attempted to seize power by force of arms.
Meanwhile, the UN's World Food Programme says around 20 million people in Sudan are suffering from malnutrition, with 6 million at risk of famine. Deputy Executive Director Carl Scow warned on X that aid convoys are stuck, facing huge logistical and security challenges. The World Food Programme says airdropping aid may be the only way to get help through the blockade and prevent further loss of life in what it calls the world's worst food crisis. For its own part, the African Union says the ongoing war in Sudan is a stain on the world's conscience. Speaking at the Doha Forum on Sunday, AU Peace and Security Commissioner Bankole Adeoye said more than 2.5 years of fighting show international failure and a lack of global coordination. He stressed the urgent need to keep pushing efforts to end the conflict.
Everyone knows that solving.
Meanwhile, Sudanese Foreign Minister Muhyiddin Salam Ahmed praised Algeria's support for Sudan's unity, security, and stability. The phone call came on Sunday with Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf, during which the two discussed the state of bilateral relations and ways to strengthen cooperation. They also exchanged views on the latest developments and the tragic events unfolding in Sudan. In a separate development in Africa, fighting has flared again in the DRC just 2 days after a peace deal with Rwanda. Clashes in the Ruzizi plain have now reached Luvungi in South Kivu, forcing residents to flee in large numbers and worsening an already fragile humanitarian situation. Here's Yassine Rikti now.
South Kivu in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo has erupted into violence again. Just days after a peace agreement with Rwanda, hospitals are overwhelmed and thousands are fleeing renewed clashes. Mary Mapensi was caught in a sudden bomb attack while trying to escape with her child.
We were about to climb the mountain just past the Luberizi bridge. When we reached the first houses in Mutarul, those ahead of us and behind us were unharmed, but we in the middle were struck by bombs, one after another. The first, then the second, then the third. People started falling. Some died instantly. I was injured and thought I was the only one hit, but then I realized my child, who was on my back, has also been wounded.
At Ruzizi General Hospital, coffins carried by villagers line the corridors. Wards are crowded with women, men and children injured by shrapnel. Medical staff describe a constant stream of victims with no clear count of the dead and wounded.
Pour la journée d'hier, nous avons reçu 37 blessés.
Yesterday, we received a total of 37 injured people and 6 bodies. 3 of the victims were brought in dead, while 3 others, including a child under 3 years old, died at the scene. Among the 37 wounded, at least 20 are between the ages of 5 and 20.
Fighting has intensified over the past days in and around Luvungi, Katagota and Kamanyola, with residents reporting heavy explosions and constant gunfire. Thousands have fled their homes, seeking safety from the escalating violence. The renewed hostilities come less than 48 hours after a peace deal between Congo and Rwanda, once seen as a breakthrough for the conflict-torn East. That fragile optimism has now given way to fear as South Kivu once again becomes a battleground.
In another African development, Benin's authorities say they foiled a coup attempt on Sunday morning. Interior Minister Alassane Seydou confirmed that the army regained control over a small group of soldiers who tried to destabilize the country. Foreign Minister Jadi Bakari said most of the army and National Guard stay loyal. The African Union, meanwhile, condemned the attempt, warning that coups threaten stability and democracy, and reaffirmed its zero-tolerance policy toward any unconstitutional change of government. Floods and storms have devastated parts of Indonesia and Southeast Asia, leaving hundreds dead, thousands missing, and communities struggling for food, water, and medical help. Here is more with Karim Mustafawi.
With roads and bridges destroyed, aid is only now starting to reach the hardest hit areas, including Aji Tamyang, where entire villages were wiped out by fast-moving deluges. Survivors recount horrific stories as their homes were swept away by the floods.
Thank God we can now get clean water because we had been cooking with muddy water that we had left to settle. It was very difficult to get clean water. We didn't get any for 9 days. We even ate rice that had been submerged in water, which we washed and cooked with muddy water.
At the region's only hospital, conditions remain critical. Medical staff say the disease is spreading rapidly as the personnel are overwhelmed.
These workers don't even know what being tired means. They're truly extraordinary.
People know me as a nurse. When I can't do something, it feels devastating. I can only give the medicine we have. Everything is destroyed.
Authorities report that at least 920 people have died, with hundreds more still missing. Local officials are urging Jakarta to declare a national emergency. The storm has also affected neighboring countries, with around 200 deaths reported in southern Thailand and Malaysia.
And finally, it's time to catch up on more stories making headlines worldwide with Sofian Kinturi in the News in Brief.
UNICEF warns of a worsening malnutrition crisis in Sudan, with more than 2.1 million children under 5 at risk of famine. At the end of her visit, UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell urged urgent international action to protect children and support the humanitarian response. She said the arrival of refugees from Sudan has pushed 9.3 million people into deeper humanitarian need, straining already limited resources and essential services. Russia's defense ministry announced that its forces have taken control of 2 new towns in eastern Ukraine. In a statement posted on Telegram on Sunday, the ministry said that the troops seized the town of Kosharyovka in Kharkiv and fully captured Rovnoy in Donetsk. China's Navy accused Japanese military aircraft of repeatedly approaching and disturbing its training. Japan in turn said Chinese forces targeted their aircraft with radar in 2 dangerous incidents near Okinawa, allegations Beijing denies. Algeria moved closer to the Arab Cup quarter-finals with sweeping 5-1 win over Bahrain in Doha. The result puts the Greens on 4 points after the opening draw with Sudan, ahead of their final group stage match against Iraq.
And with this, we reach the end of our news for tonight. For more updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. Until next time, do take care.